What if we could see our parents not just as the people who raised us, but as the full, complex, vibrant human beings they were before we ever arrived? In today's conversation, poet and author Jill Bialosky joins me to explore memory, loss, and legacy, and how writing her mother's life backwards helped her heal forward. This is not just a memoir, it's a love story, it's a reckoning, and it's a powerful reminder that even in the hardest endings, there's always a beginning. Welcome to Make It a Great One with Dr. Dan. I'm Dan Peters, psychologist and leadership coach. This show is all about bringing hope, connection, awareness, and wisdom through meaningful conversations that inspire us to be the best versions of ourselves and have a positive impact on humanity. This is your space to pause, reflect, and reconnect with who you are, what you care about, and who you want to be. We have this moment, this day, and this life. Let's make it a great one. Today's show is The End is the Beginning, the story of a mother's life and love with Jill Bialosky. Jill is the author of 5 acclaimed collections of poetry, most recently Asylum. Her poems have appeared in The New Yorker, The New York Times, The Atlantic, and many, many others. She is also the author of several novels, including The Deceptions, and several works of fiction, including History of a Suicide and Poetry Will Save Your Life. In 2015, Jill was honored by the Poetry Society of America for her distinguished contribution to the field, and she lives in New York City. Jill, great to see you. Welcome to the show.
Oh, great to see you, Dan. Thank you for having me.
It's been about 2.5 years since we last did
Wow.
one of these things on the 10-year anniversary of the History of a Suicide, the beautiful and painful and life-affirming book about your sister, Kim.
Yes, it's hard to believe it's been 3 years.
Yeah, yeah. And here we are again with you once again writing a beautiful, real, heart-wrenching, painful, affirming memoir about your mother, your family, and about life.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Dan. That pretty much sums it up.
And for those who are watching the video, I am going to hold up
Oh,
the book because it is a beautiful cover, and there are irises on the cover, which, of course, was your mother's name, and a lot of symbolism in this. And how, like let's say I want to go in 2 different directions at the same time, which I can't. So I'm going to say both, and we're going to take one of them. One of them is, what was the process of you deciding to write this book, take on this project, which of course was much more than that? And as I say that, I know it dovetails with COVID and lockdown and your mom passing during 2 weeks after we were all locked down. And so I guess I'm throwing those both out there because I have some idea that perhaps they're connected.
mhm. Yes, that's very true, Dan. For years I have thought about writing about my mother, writing a personal account of her life. But I wasn't really sure how I would do it. And the reason why I wanted to write about her life is because I feel that her life marks a particular historical period for a woman who was born in 1933 and grew up to expect and hope to be married and have children. And that future that my mother was hoping for, circumstances beyond her control, the death of my father left her with having to recreate a new future for herself, which was very difficult for a woman during that time period. And then you're right that the first month of COVID in March, my mother passed away on March 20th, the first month of COVID. And if you remember, there were those very intense quarantines and restrictions. And I was living in New York, and my mother was in Cleveland. When I learned that she was failing and in hospice, I desperately wanted to be there with her while she passed. And of course, I wasn't able to. Because the home that she was in, you had to quarantine for 14 days before I could even enter. And then because of COVID, the funeral for my mother had to be outside on the grave site, and only 10 people could be there, again, because of the restrictions. And luckily I have a sister who was living in Cleveland at the time, and so I was able to view my mother's funeral via FaceTime. But in another sense, this experience made it very difficult for me to process
Mm,
her her loss.
mm,
And that's when I decided that I would try to write this book and see what I could preserve.
mm. And the end is the beginning has multiple meanings. Um, you you start at the end and you work your way backwards, which I've never read a book in that sequence, and I was just I was pulled in by seeing that it I wanna say the progression, but obviously it's not a progression in one respect, it's a regression in a sense,
Mm,
but it was a progression of learning about your mom and her fullness, and as you say, it intersects with, historical time periods of each of those from her 80s to her childhood, and,
mm,
so one is tracking several things because you know what happened and you're holding what happened with what was happening in each period of her life, and you brought her so much to life
mm.
in each of the chapters of her life.
Well, thank you. Yes, the somehow telling her story from the end to the beginning seemed very organic for me, although it was quite challenging just narratively. But I realized that since the last 10 years of her life, she was losing her cognitive abilities due to Alzheimer's disease. And that was really difficult to experience, both for me and I'm sure for my mother. And I had this idea that if I wrote about those late years where she was slowly losing her cognitive abilities, and then I could slowly kind of bring her to life again.
Mm,
Um, and and it really made a lot of sense at a certain point to continue to do it that way. And I was also inspired by a T.S. Eliot poem, The Four Quartets. And I write in the epigraph to the book, what we call the beginning is often the end, and to make an end is to make a beginning. The end is where we start from. And those are lines from the Four Quartets. And those lines really spoke to me because Eliot's conceit really is how the beginning of our lives are always with us at the end of our lives and throughout our life journey. And so the end is really the beginning, and the beginning is the end.
mhm.
And yeah, I just
Yeah.
found that those lines very true and consoling.
Hmm. Your mom's so it was, again, very powerful to learn about her backwards, and there just it was so many lessons for a reader about how life circumstance changes the course,
Mhm.
and who we see in front of us is only part of that individual because we don't know the roads that that person has walked and what they have been through. And there were so many parts of your mom's life where she was so full of life, was so full of possibility. And as you point out, born in a different time, would be have the opportunity to set the world on fire historically as a female and with all of her life circumstances, how hard that was, including leaving her education for the love of her life, your father, and the ramifications once your father was gone. Like there's so many things, and then all those times that her spark was dimmed,
Mhm.
um, grief turning into depression, um, and then repeat based on life circumstances, just the complexity of a human journey.
Yes, thank you for saying that. I do feel that, that was my intention in the book was really to give, uh to enlighten the reader about the different circumstances that can come at us as human beings. We never really know what might happen, when a tragedy might strike, and how those tragedies and losses can define who we are.
Mhm,
And I was very interested in uncovering the woman behind my mother. And
mhm,
one of my intentions of the book really is to invite the reader into that experience
mhm,
of thinking about who our mother or our father was before we were even born. And my favorite parts about writing the book were those last three chapters where I write about m- her meeting and falling in love with my father, and her high school days when she was so alive and popular and happy and had a huge community being involved in clubs and sororities, and such a rich life. And then her childhood with her very beloved family, a very close knit Jewish family in Cleveland, Ohio. And I recognized so much writing the book how much our early years influence who we are.
mhm, mhm. Um, and these aren't spoiler alerts for anyone who's going to read it, but I think important to talk about as we talk about the sliding doors of life. Your mother have an amazing relationship with her mother, your grandmother, who suddenly passed away when she was 8, with complications, and then to marry your father, which seemed like such just a love affair, and that they both felt so grateful to have each other, and then for him to suddenly pass away completely unexpectedly at the age of 30 when your mom is 25. And then, of course, history of suicide, your baby sister. Um, you just the human spirit, like, there are times when I just don't understand how people can go on, and not that it's easy and not that it's pretty, but she kept going on.
Mhm.
She kept going on.
Yes, and I thought about that a lot, Dan. What can crush a person and what can keep us going through really difficult times. And I came to the conclusion that I think it was love that kept my mother, um, kept her going. And, the love that she had for my father, even though they were only together for maybe 6 or 7 years of their lives, were such precious years for her, where she felt so loved and protected, and she felt so much love for my father. And they just had this cozy years of creating a family, one daughter after another. The three of us are 15 months apart. And, their lives were really just beginning. And, it was just such a tragedy that my father died so suddenly of a heart condition when he was 30 and my mother was 25. And I I do feel in a way that my book could be almost read as a romance between them, because to the end of my mother's life, she was still holding on to that love and the hope that she would be, well, she just knew she was going to be reconnected with him somehow. So I give her that. I know that idea was something she held very close.
And it it was clear. It was clear in the book, in the stories
Mm.
throughout her life. We have actually a geographical personal connection. When I saw Shaker, I'm like Shaker Heights, and then I saw Cleveland Heights High. So my father, who was born in 1939, because I asked him about this. So he went to Cleveland Heights High. He was
Oh,
from
wow.
University Heights, and his um, among the happiest years of his life was being a BAT at Cleveland Heights, which your dad was, and so um, he missed them. He was a little younger than both
Right,
of them, and I said no.
right.
I said, wait, but her dad, Milton, he was a football star, quarterback. Like he was, you had to know him. And he's like, I think I was just he must have been too young. But I felt that personal connection
Wow,
to the
that's
place.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yes, I know, I've been hearing from people feeling some of those connections,
Hmm.
reading my book. It's very, yeah, life is
Yeah. Well,
so many coincidences.
yes, coincidences, and are they, right? Coincidences and
Mhm.
synchronicities. As I was taking in your story and reading, among the things that I was thinking about, knowing that we were going to have this conversation, was what did you hope? Was there something you hoped to gain personally from this? I mean, obviously, you have put out several works of art,
Mhm.
um, and I know that is what you do. And usually, the professional is the personal as well, and more meaningful when it is.
Well, I think I really did. Um, Writing is really a way for me to understand complex emotions and feelings and circumstances. And I go in blindly, I mean, I have an idea of what I want to do, and then I just go down the rabbit hole, and I don't know what's going to come forward for me. And I think just by recalling so many memories and being able to create a portrait of my mother and her life, maybe just, I think in a strange way, well, it kept me very close to her as I was writing the book. And it also relieved some of the guilt that I had, because, you know, um, from a very young age, I felt very protective of my mother, and I somehow intuited what she went through, or her sadness, or her vulnerability. I think I really intuited, and and I felt that she needed me to help take care of her. And whether or not that was true or not, it's how I felt. And so really, there wasn't a day that I can remember when she was alive that I didn't think about her, worry about her, wonder what was happening. And I think by writing the book, I saw much more of my devotion
Mm.
than I recognized.
Yeah.
And that made me feel better, I think.
Hmm.
I mean, one always wishes they could do more, right?
You're right.
Um,
Right.
but I also was building my own life, and that tension I always felt, who
Hmm.
do I owe my time and responsibility to? And I think most adult children feel that way for their parents, or some aspect of that conflict.
Absolutely. And it is complicated and is complex, and often there's regret and there's guilt, right? It
Mhm.
comes with our human package, and sometimes there's real reasons for them, and a lot of times they're, I don't know, I feel like we're our worst critics, right? It's too much. We put too much on ourselves, and in your situation, and I imagine for your sisters, depending on um, their relationship to your mom and birth order, is
Mhm.
when you have a parent who has deals with depression, has had excruciating loss, which always is followed by grief, and
Mhm.
usually hard grief, as your mom experienced after your father passed. It changes the relationship, right? So as sensitive person as you are, there were times when your mom wasn't able to care for you, and your aunts would swoop in, and the older you get, something's up. You don't know what's up. You don't necessarily know what's going on, but you're connected to her. And there were lots of times when she was focused on her own life, or she again was struggling in her own life, and there were lots of times when she was focused on your guys' life and
Mhm.
all in as a mom. So I imagine it shapes you. It shapes you, and it's hard to untangle.
Mhm. I think that is true. I do. The other thing I realized, I think, writing the book, was that because my mother didn't have a livelihood, or a higher education beyond her first quarter in college, she and the way that she was brought up in that era, she was brought up to think that a man would take care of her. And I know that after my father died, her relatives and family instilled in her that this message that, that she needed to find a new husband to take care of her and to take care of us. And some of that resonated for me when I was thinking about her high school years, where she was so popular and she was quite beautiful, and she had a lot of attention from men, and that was something that after my father died, um, she was really hoping, of course not right away, but at a certain
Hmm.
point she was still not even 30 years old. She was hoping to find new love, and someone to take care of her. And that knowledge, I understood very early on the importance of being independent, because I witnessed some of the fallout of that that path. And my sisters and I all knew at a very young age that we had to take care of ourselves and that we didn't want to be dependent on anyone. So, in a way, my mother gave us this gift of, you know, knowing that our lives would be strengthened by
Mhm.
having our own independence.
Yes, one of the sayings is, adversity is opportunity, challenge is opportunity, and I know that some people think that's just the shiny way of looking at tough stuff that happens, and tough stuff happens, and they do define us, and they really are opportunities. And what was clear as you were talking about yourself in the book is when you finally could get away to, first of all, high school, you were a hard worker. You were always working. You were like always working for the tips, right? Waiting tables. And then going away to college where there was still um, the anxieties and all this social stuff and being away and feeling both bad and exhilarated about being away, but again, hardworking. You're working your whole way through. You're writing. And as you said, I think like you always felt better working, being
Mhm.
productive, being busy. And I can see how some of that relates to the messages that you directly and indirectly grew up with about taking care of yourself and making it happen for yourself.
Yes, that I felt that very strongly, and in a way, you could read my book, The End is the Beginning, as a sort of a cautionary tale of what can happen when you don't have the well, my mother did, had periods in her life where she was working, but she always felt the crushing financial pressures. And she did go through, as you said, episodes of depression. And during that time, when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, depression really wasn't something that people talked about or really understood. And so it wasn't really until I think the first book that I read was Darkness Visible by William Styron. I believe that's the correct title. Um, and and really then was able to understand that depression is an illness. And there were periods when my mother was very depressed where I felt frustrated with her, and I just wanted to say, get on with it.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that's really not helpful. um,
It doesn't work. It doesn't
no, it
work.
doesn't
Yeah.
work that way.
Yeah.
And so, yes, and now I think we do live in a culture where depression is understood more fully to be an illness that needs to be treated,
Mhm. Mhm.
either through therapy or medication, or I
Right.
mean, I'm not
Right. Well,
a
back in
doctor, but
back in your mom's day, particularly, it was clear when your dad suddenly passed in such a traumatic experience for your mother to witness it, and then for him to be gone with three girls under with two-ish, basically. Um,
right.
was the go to the doctor and get tranquilizers, right?
Yeah,
It
that's
was
what
it
they
would
did.
right? It was all about, like, basically, and it's like the old movies, right? It's just
Mhm.
someone's hysterical, the doctor comes, here's the pill to knock them out so they don't have to feel that immediate pain, or, that
Mhm.
immediate overwhelming pain. And again, that's where things were at the time, and now we know a lot more, like you're saying, about, um, first of all, the natural reactions of grief, and how grief and depression look a lot alike, but grief is a natural response to a tremendous loss. Um, and then, of course, grief can and sometimes does turn into depression over time when someone can't shake it. Um, But again, nowadays it's not just about knocking people out and giving them temporary comfort. It's about trying to help people work through the loss, and to stave off and try to help with the depression, which is always around the corner in these situations.
Yes, I think that that's true. Initial acute grief is very traumatizing. Um, and I definitely felt that the depression and some of the grief that my mother suffered possibly um, led her to have Alzheimer's. Um, I mean, I'm not, as I said, I'm not a doctor, but um, it felt to me that they felt connected to me.
Mm. Hmm. Let's talk about some of the joy,
Yeah.
right? Let's talk about what your mom taught you about joy and about fully living life.
Hmm. Yeah. Could I read a little passage?
Of course.
There's one passage that I think communicates this. I hear my mother's voice when I put on a sweater and feel an itch because the label is still attached. When I scold our puppy who is barking, I hear myself say "Sha," something my mother used to say when she wanted quiet. When I set the table for a dinner party, I remember how carefully she set her own table, choosing the right tablecloth, linen napkins, never paper. I boil noodles, and when draining them, remember always to run cold water over the noodles to stop them from continuing to cook, as she taught me. Never wash your face with soap, she told me. It will dry your skin. Wash your underclothes by hand. Never put them in the washing machine. When I drive in the car and hold up my hands to view my nails, I remember my mother doing the same gesture to admire her manicure. When I brake suddenly and a passenger is in the seat next to me, I shoot my arm out, the same way my mother used to protect me from hitting the dashboard. I call my son honey, as my mother used to call me. I remember to smile even when I'm sad. I choose kindness as my mother always did, and I imagine too that some of what she had taught me she may have learned from her own mother, those precious 9 years of her early life she had with her, and reflect upon what I now bequeath to my own son, and marvel over how we are shaped by those we love. So, yes, my mother had this great ability to be empathetic, and she was very loving, and she had close friends, and they had fun together. They went flea marketing, and they went to the movies, and they went out to dinner, and they told each other their concerns and buoyed them when they needed to be buoyed. And, my mother she was a wonderful gourmet cook. She loved to cook, and she liked to have dinner parties and on the holidays. And she just had a real love of life, and she loved men. She
Hmm.
loved dating. She even when she was in, I write about this in my book, when she was in assisted living, and she was very happy there. And they had like what the prom, they called it, and my mother was
The queen,
annoyed with
was
the
she
prom
the
queen, and she became attached to another man who was at the care home, and they would hold hands together and watch the movies. So she just had this way of she had a very beautiful smile, and people were attracted to her, both men and women. Even when I was growing up, um, some of my friends would come over, and they loved my mother, and they would tell her what was bothering them. And, yes, she could be a lot of fun.
Hmm. Well, she had a presence. I mean, she clearly had a presence, and you, I believe, wrote about that. She was ahead of her time in many ways, and I don't know if you said if you wrote maybe you alluded to Mary Tyler Moore, or it just made me think of
Oh,
Mary Tyler Moore, who was a trendsetter and was ahead of her time and brought the time with her in her life and in her career. Did you make that connection, or am I just making that up?
no, I don't think I did, but I
Yeah.
do reference some other TV shows of that era,
Hmm. Hmm.
like Father Knows Best,
Hmm.
and yeah, she just at a certain point, I think that my mother stopped really caring about what other people thought
Hmm.
and was just herself, which is
Before her Alzheimer's.
right,
Yes.
definitely,
Right.
yes. And I admired that about her.
Hmm. What are the lessons to pass on to all of us about the guilt we carry?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a big one, isn't it? Um, well, I think that at a certain point, guilt can keep you stuck, right? From really, facing what is actually going on, and sometimes you realize that, how can I say this, that maybe some of the guilt that you're carrying isn't actually real.
Mm,
Um, I mean, that we sometimes feel that we have to be responsible for other people. And in a sense, of course, we want to feel responsible for the people that we love, but we also have to be responsible for ourselves. And so to achieve that balance, I think is something that everybody has to go through.
mhm,
Um, you
mhm,
know, um, People live with, I hope that my book shows that we live with deep emotions and deep experience that were shaped by the historical moment, by society, by what's expected of us. And when circumstances don't go the way the status quo, sometimes people can be left behind, which is really not fair.
mhm.
So I hope that, I guess I don't have a clear answer, Dan. It's a
Yeah,
big question.
it is a big question, and it's not clear. I appreciate what you said because it is messy,
Mhm.
and we only can do what we do. I even hesitate to say do our best in any given moment because we can't always even do our best in any given moment. Like,
Mhm.
we just do what we can in any given moment, and if we're distracted by our child and therefore we're not able to pay attention to our parent, that's one thing. And if we're overly paying attention to our parent and therefore don't have the attention to give to our child or our partner, like, then there's that. So it's constantly a juggle of just, again, I'm going to say doing the best. All I guess that is like
Mhm.
doing the best we can in the moment, and then trying to have some kindness and some self compassion for just
Yes.
understanding how complex this whole thing is, and to make it more complex, something
Mhm.
you said reminded me of another theme in the book and in all of our lives is generational trauma. So we carry the stuff that happens in our own life, and yet we are also given and carrying stuff that happened in our ancestors' lives. And that's
Mhm.
just if we start with your mom losing her mom and don't even go back the generations before that. And you touch on that um, a bit, and I was wondering just your thoughts on what that was it a ghost? Like, what does that feel?
Mm,
How would you explain, or and then and now your understanding of the generational trauma that came through your mom and into your life?
mm.
I'm not asking easy questions.
No, no, I'm thinking about
Yeah.
it. I think that, well, one thing that I did recognize writing the book when I did, write the chapter about my mother's childhood and her closeness with her mother and her mother's sudden death. Her mother was pregnant, and she got scarlet fever, which was rampant at that time, and there were no antibiotics, and she was pregnant, and she died giving birth to my mother's brother, and he lived. And trying to imagine that experience for my mother was really made me, when you write so deeply, you really do feel the emotions and the emotions of that experience. And I think that having the loss of her mother, and she then was coddled by her aunts, by her father's sisters who came in, and her grandmother that came in to help take care of her and the new baby, her brother. And again, really, she said to me that nobody talked about her mother after she died. It was just that in her family, people never talked about tragedies after they happened. So she didn't have a real way of even processing that loss in terms of being able to talk about it. And I'm sure that, that deep loss that she carried somehow, um, impacted her parenting. That's all I could say about it.
Hmm.
Um, but I was thinking about what you said earlier about, how we process guilt, and it made me think about reading, and it made me think about how I've been a lifelong reader of novels, and particularly I love to read novels and poetry, and how novels, allow us to feel empathy when we read a book. Maybe when we read my book, the end is the beginning. Readers may feel empathetic to my story and my mother's story. And, learning empathy and compassion is something that I learned through, I mean, I came to understand deeper emotions in the way that people process these losses through fiction and through poetry. And reading is a great way for people to connect with the human experience, who are feeling these deep emotions of loss and grief. I mean, I don't know who said it, but that every novel is about love, loss, and death.
Hmm.
Whether it's a novel written in the Victorian period or in the contemporary world.
Hmm.
So I think in a lot of ways, that's how I was able to process a lot of my emotions
Hmm. Hmm.
as a young girl and as a woman.
Yeah, the writing, it it took you, right? It pulled you, and
Yeah.
it was not only your art and skill, but also therapeutic at the same time.
Yeah, I think that writing and reading can do that.
Hmm.
I firmly, it's um, my life's journey depends on books. And
um,
art
and art,
too.
yes. Oh, so I did have a question about your art because you are a poet and you also write novels. And yet I could see, I mean, I was able to sense where the the writing becomes poetry. I imagine
Mhm.
it's pretty intertwined. The question I had for you is when you went from yourself talking about yourself in first person to yourself writing about yourself in third person. And
Mhm.
I was really curious as to how that came about and what you were conveying.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that was a narrative, tactic I employed, um, to maybe have a little bit of distance between the the writer and the person.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, writing is just such a mysterious process. Even when you're writing personal experience, you're somehow, you're creating a character that, yes, it's the portrait of my mother, but it's also a character, really, right? I mean, um, I'm imbuing this. I'm a character in the book. My mother's a character in the book. My sisters are characters in the book. Um, and of course, when you're writing a memoir, you have to make decisions about what you're going to reveal and what you're going to withhold. And for a long time, I thought I was just telling my mother's story. And I think in the part that you're referring to, I realized I was also telling parts of my own story.
Mhm. That makes sense to me. So
Yeah.
the you as the one of the main characters writing about you as one of the main characters, and then you as the author writing about a character,
Yeah.
which is describing yourself. Yes, yes, yeah, I see that, and it was very subtle and poetic, which is why
Mhm.
I found myself in the middle of it. I'm like, wow, I realized what you had done after I
Mhm.
was already in it. Um,
You're a very close
yeah.
reader.
It was, I was in. What do you want actually, before I go there,
Uh-huh.
I'm curious how your sisters have, reacted to this book.
Yeah, well, I'm very lucky because my sisters have been very supportive, and they see the book as as a tribute to my mother. And one sister said, I know our mother, knows this is happening, and they were very supportive in sharing stories and photographs and Um, I mean, I know that it was emotional for them
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
read the book. I know that. And I just really appreciated the support. I don't think that I could have felt free enough to write the book if I didn't feel that they would be supportive.
Mhm. Mhm. What now that it's that Iris is out there and the end is the beginning is out there, are you hearing feedback that you didn't expect? Like, as these works get out there, they become their own lives.
Hmm.
I'm just curious, is there's anything that you've heard that you did not anticipate or, something that you would hope for that you are
Hmm.
receiving?
Well, I have been hearing that people are connecting to the book and they're connecting their own experiences that somehow, especially I think when I write about my mother's younger years, people are connecting to that and seeing aspects of their own lives in the story, which is exactly what I want as a writer. You want people to feel some of the universal truths that a story can evoke. Um, so that's been great. But it's very strange when you finish a book because it's sort of like at least for me, it's kind of like there's this relief that it's like, oh, already like, between like two covers, like you can't go in there anymore.
Mm,
That it's become this immortal thing that you're giving to other people, and in a way it helps me to be able to let go of it
mm,
and let the book speak for itself. So I feel lucky
mhm.
that, and I love the cover.
Yeah, it's
So,
beautiful.
it's very beautiful, and I like hearing from readers, and, um, so so
Yeah,
yes, I still have this surreal feeling that I can't believe I did it.
mhm. And no takebacks now.
No takebacks.
You write
No
at
redos,
no
though.
redos. You write, at the end is my mother's beginning too, and my beginning.
Mm.
And in the end is the beginning of who we are. The end and the beginning are in each of us. What's your beginning? What's your new beginning?
Well, right now, my new beginning is, really enjoying, my love of my new puppy. Sophia, I've never had a, dog as an adult, and, it's just been very magical to feel this attachment that I have to her. Maybe that will come out in another book. But, I think, yeah, my beginning it is a new beginning now that my mother has passed, and I feel sad at times and I miss her. But it does feel like a new beginning for me because I did carry so much worry, especially at the end when she had Alzheimer's, and me and my sisters were responsible for her care, and it's just a very difficult disease, and um, I write about it in the first three chapters of the book, and I do feel a release, that I don't have to witness that.
Mhm.
I like to remember my mother when she was, you know,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
very happy and active, and the thing is that I also recognize through writing my book is that even though somebody loses their cognitive abilities, and I did research about this, the person is still there.
Mhm.
My mother was always still there, and I just had to find ways of communicating with her so that I could see her spirit that I know was just still alive inside her.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
I guess that's my new beginning.
Yeah. And for those of you who are not watching this and are just listening, Jill has a very peaceful smile on her face right now. Well, you brought your sister Kim to life for all of us who did not know her in History of a Suicide, and now you've done the same for Iris, your mom Iris, for all of us who did not know her.
Mm.
So they are both out there in the world with people in the present. As we read these books, it's very present and very immersive, and um, both of their lives and your life and your telling of their life just has so much to teach all of us about life. We're all doing this together the best we can with all of the complexity that exists.
Thank you so much, Dan. That means a lot to me.
So let everyone know where they can get this new beautiful book. with the irises on the cover, as well as your other perhaps future projects as well.
Yes, you can visit my website, jillbialosky.com. It's BIALOSKY.com. And the book is available at, I'm sure, most major outlets. And another great place to buy books is bookshop.com online. I recommend that.
Well, thank you. And best of luck with this new beginning with Sophia. And all the love to you both.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks so much.
Jill is so real, and she just brings the humanness to all of her writing and her conversation to really bring us back to the complexities of life and how we can learn from the pain and the love and the legacies. Here are 5 key takeaways. Number 1, loss isn't linear, and neither is healing. Jill's reverse chronological memoir reveals how understanding can deepen when we walk backward through someone's life. Number 2, the stories of our parents shape us, even the ones we never heard. Uncovering her mother's full humanity helped Jill process guilt and grief and see her own strength. Number 3, generational trauma runs deep, but so does generational resilience. Jill traces how loss ripples through the family lines and how love helps us carry on. 4, empathy and understanding can be learned through art. Reading and writing opened Jill to the complexity of others' pain and her own. And number 5, beginnings often emerge from endings. The end of her mother's life became a new chapter for Jill, filled with release, reflection, and even joy. Thanks for listening, everyone. Thanks for being a part of our community where we have these real, rich discussions and think about all of life's challenges, complexities, and adventures. Please pass this show on to anyone you think will benefit. Thank you for your 5-star reviews, for being a part of our community, and for subscribing. As always, I will leave you with this. We have this moment, this day, and this life. Let's make it a great one. This has been a Peters and Rossi production. Make It a Great One with Dr. Dan is produced by Laura Rossi. Our engineer is Phil Rossi. Theme music is Uplifting Folk by Awesome Music. Artwork by Kelly Dwyer. Follow us on social media at Dr. Dan Peters. For more information, visit drdanpeters.com.